Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Would Your Ideal World Be? A new podcast which examines many important people and the important things in their lives, what they think about most current trends at the moment, what they think about certain subject matters, and of course, what their ideal world would be. As part of a special series of episodes that we're doing, covering the London mayoral elections 2020, today's guest is Dr. Peter Gammons, a motivational speaker who is very widely known and is, according to his website, is one of the world's most popular and in-demand inspirational motivational speakers, and he's been recorded as having been spoken to some of the largest events in history, including the past 23 years at the main Shaddi Catholic rallies in the Philippines, attended by crowds of up to 4 million people. He's currently running as the UKIP candidate for London Mayor and was previously a member of the Brexit Party. Hello. Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Hi. It's thanks for coming on again. Thank you for coming on. The first question I wanted to ask you, if that was okay, is that you've just been elected as the mayor of London, hypothetically. You just entered City Hall and are getting used to your surroundings. What is your first major policy that you work on, and why?
First major policy that I work on. Well, I don't know that I would start with one thing. I think there are many things, but the first thing I would do would be to get all the roadworks completed in the first month, because London is congested and all of the implications of congestion, like pollution, and nothing seems to be getting done. I did a journey the other day, and I think I was heading out to Barking, and I must have passed 50 roadworks. Roads were shut, barriers were up for roadwork to be done, and not a single person was working on any of it. I came back later that evening, and at night time, still nobody was working on it. And I made the comment in reference to the current mayor. I said, even someone that stocks shelves in Sainsbury's knows that you restock the shelves at night. And this should be done. These should be completed. Every time the roads are blocked, it causes congestion, it causes problems. And has a great impact on everybody, old people that are coming home with their shopping, right to people that are trying to carry out their work. So the roads need a major thing. We need to really start working on building genuinely affordable homes immediately, because I want to get on target for. I've already lost a year as mayor to Khan getting 1 year of the mayor's term, which is unfair. And so we've got to build really affordable homes. And as I've said, my plan, I'm looking at over 100 derelict and abandoned. It's actually close to 200, but I'm not sure all are suitable. But sites to develop small starter homes. My target is for young couples, young people, to get them in the property ladder. It's such a tragedy. So many families that have lived in London for generations, the kids are having to move out now because they can't afford housing in London. And it's going to be a major problem for London if all the young people, with all their intelligence, all of their knowledge of technology and media and all of these things, if they all have to move out of London. And so these are just some of the things that I immediately want to do.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I'm going to do this two-pronged, do you think that the problem of, say, congestion in the streets of London and the stuff like that has got worse since Khan became mayor, or has it just been a constant pattern for the last few years anyway?
No, it definitely is crazy under Khan. Some of the things that he's done, like 24 hours for bus lanes to be closed. Before, it made sense to have the bus lanes during the major peak periods, but cars unable to use them at any time now is ridiculous. It means, and anybody who travels in London sees it, traffic stockpiled, taxis sitting among ordinary cars, taxis where Khan's forced them to buy these £70,000 plus 77,000 if you add the interest, new so-called electric taxis, even though they only do between 30 and 50 miles before they switch to petrol or diesel. He's forced them to have these things, and they're not allowed to go in the bus lanes, even though they're registered by Transport for London. So there's this. Then there's the bicycle lanes. He's put in these two-way bicycle lanes and taken up half the roads of London. So it's ridiculous what he's done. And it is, yes, as I say, it is the cause of the congestion, and as a result, it's also the cause of the pollution. So It's frightening the way it's all going. Closing down neighborhoods now to cars so that people have to park in someone else's street. Some people having to drive 2 or 3 extra miles to get back to the starting point of their road. The whole thing is crazy. And what annoys me most is this is a borrowed term for him. He's not currently the elected mayor of London. His term ran out, and due to COVID, he got a free extra year. Took a year, which I think is so unfair from the whoever, even if it's him, is voted to be the next mayor. Took a year of their term and has used this year to force onto Londoners things which Londoners do not want. And as mayor of London, I'm there. The mayor is there to represent the people. He's there to carry out the wishes of the people. Yes, he has to look at many issues, including environment, and I am a very keen environmentalist, and many other things, but he is ultimately a public servant. Politicians are there as public servants. And the party I represent, UKIP, many people have many concepts about the party, but if you get to the heart of what UKIP is, we are campaigners for democracy. It wasn't an issue of Brexit primarily. It was an issue of the people need to decide. What we forced was not people to come out of Europe. Nobody could force that on people. We forced a referendum. We forced the government to let the people decide when there were politicians who were voted by the people, voted in to represent the people, but were representing themselves. And so as mayor, I will make sure that the people are consulted. No low traffic zone as will be put into any neighborhood without the neighborhood deciding if they want it or not.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about the affordable homes thing you mentioned, where will you base these, what sort of brownfield sites will you develop them on? Because by the way you're talking, it sounds like you're not particularly keen on building on greenfield sites.
Yeah. We have to look very much. And I have to be honest with you and say that as I am not mayor and as I am with a party that doesn't have a lot of money and as I have a small team of people working with me, I can't give you all of the information. I know many of the sites that I'm looking at, and I'm not giving all of the information away because I don't want all the other candidates stealing my ideas and policies. But there's everything from disused football fields, from disused hospitals. There's one which was a fireworks factory with 40 buildings on it that are derelict. Of course, you couldn't produce fireworks in one building, and so. Sorry, there's calls coming through as I'm talking to you on my iPhone. I'm having to reject them. Yeah, as I said, so they built 40 separate buildings on the site. There are many derelict sites, and so I'll consult with conservation agencies about whether we may have to take some greenfields. We have to, if we're going to keep allowing people to move into London, we're going to have to provide housing for them. So we have to. You can't have it both ways. But with all of the developments that I propose, they'll need to have green areas, parks, free space for the residents. Everything will have to have. And I'm working in partnership conjunction with several other charities to make many of the concrete jungles of London currently much more friendly with trees and private parks and all kinds of areas. Because trees are the vacuum cleaners of the planet. And I believe that trees are the most important aspect to any environmental strategy. They certainly are in mine. I have my strategy, which is called Plant a Tree by 23, to bring students from young people from all across London to plant a tree as part of their project in visiting London. So that, number one, they have London in their heart. Number two, they beautify London. And number three, they making a major contribution to getting to net zero. There's something like 10 million school children in London, slightly less than that. There's currently something like 8 million trees in London. So to plant an extra million tree, you only need something like 1 in 10 of Britain's young people to come and plant their own tree. And you've had a 10% increase in trees in London. And there are environmental groups that I'm consulting with who know places to plant those. So we have to do both of those. We have to look at neglected, abandoned places, perhaps consider how greenfields we can even make them even more environmentally friendly, but build around or on them. There's many options.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you was about crime, because you talked about on your side about making London safe again. How would you go about making London safe again, given the rise in crime, including violent crime in recent years?
We have to have more police, and I do propose a dramatic number of increase in police. But one of the things that I've especially talked about is community police on the beat, by foot, building relationships in the community. I'm older than I look, but I remember the day when the police walked everywhere. And that worked in several ways. It cut down crime because people didn't know when the police were going to be there. Now you call for them and 10, 20 minutes later, they might turn up. But they were always around there. They heard about things that were going to happen before it happened. But the most important aspect was they built relationship with the community. Today, there's a hatred of the police, and perhaps the way the police have been used has helped increase that. So some of my policies, as I said, include police on the beat. I believe also that police need to be ethnically reflective of communities. I use the example that I think it's wrong when 3 white police guys stop and search a black kid. It creates this concept of the division in communities and white oppression and all those kind of things. We need to encourage more people from Black and Asian communities to join the police and to support the people that are in their communities. The police need to become friends again with communities, because community trust is vitally important. It's not them versus us. And what we've seen at some of the peaceful rallies, where the peaceful lockdown rallies, I'm not talking about the violent Kill Bill type rallies, which nobody could ever justify, but I'm talking about people that really believe it's time to end lockdown. Many of them whose own businesses have been bankrupted or are living under incredible stress with very little income provided by the government during this period, and believe that it's time to stop lockdown, as I do. And the police have reacted very aggressively towards these people. I was out campaigning, and the police demanded my team go home. I pointed out to them that since the 8th of March, we've been free to campaign. It's legally we can campaign. And they wouldn't hear it. They threatened my team with arrest if we didn't go home. So there's been bullying, and Khan controls the Met, and this was the Met. And so basically, it appeared that he was using the Met to stop people campaigning, which is very stressful and very wrong. And so I do believe it's very important that we increase the police, that we empower the police. I've made the suggestion of using the ones like they do in the airport for stop and search, which is less invasive than emptying people's pockets or any of the methods that are used now, because we have to build strong relationships again. You know, I know the police were cleared of excessive violence at the vigil for Sarah that died. But in my opinion, it was handled very badly and very wrongly. And so there's a real need of re-educating the police. There's 2-tier policing takes place in England, which is very unfair. And so, you know, where certain rallies, people are allowed to do what they like and the police stand back and don't do anything, and others where the police are there with riot gear and truncheons. And this is totally wrong. And it's dividing London. And my goal as mayor would be to unite London. And so, yeah, we need more police. We need CTVs in many more areas. We need police on patrol in areas, especially where women are most vulnerable. These low traffic neighborhoods that Khan is forcing on communities where cars can't go are a major issue to security, especially for women who have to now be dropped on a main road and walk to their homes rather than taxis being able to take them to their home. For disabled people, they're a major serious. Of course, the biggest issue is for emergency vehicles. For example, between June and November last year, 330 emergency vehicles were held up because of these low traffic zones where roads have been blocked off in communities. 18% increase last year. And so this has been forced onto communities without their consultation. And I was in a taxi the other day where he talked about his friend who is a taxi driver. He came to one of these low traffic zones. There was an old lady in a wheelchair that he had in the car. And he said he had an option. Did he just drop her at the side of the road and she'd have to get her way somehow to her home? He couldn't do that. So he pulled over the car, he got out, he wheeled her to her door, he went back to his taxi, and 2 weeks later he gets a charge, a fine, for helping this old lady who suddenly they're blocked off her roads so that nobody can drop her off anymore. And so these are issues. My campaign slogan is it's not politics, it's about people. And so my fight is for people. I'm not fighting for political ideology. I'm fighting for ordinary people, for taxi drivers, for students, for cladding victims, for disabled people, for anyone who I believe is losing out. One of my biggest concerns is poorer families in London. These are the people that I'm fighting for, who can't just go out and buy a new electric car. Khan is penalizing them, he's fining them, he's giving them extra charges because they have diesel cars or because they have petrol cars. But think about this, you probably wouldn't be old enough to remember it, but it was Labour who told everybody, go and buy diesel cars because they're good for the environment. And now we have a Labour mayor who's banning people, penalizing them, charging them for doing what Labour told them to do. I think Labour should be sued for promoting diesel cars. And things are always changing. I don't think it's right for a mayor to punish people because they cannot go out and afford a new electric car. I do not believe it's right for a mayor to force people to buy new electric taxis when they only do between 30 and 50 miles. You know, they were advertised to do it 80, but that's as long as you don't have the radio on, you don't have air conditioning. Once you turn a heater on during the winter, you're down to 30 miles before it goes to petrol or diesel. So they spent 70,000 on this vehicle, which is probably still running on diesel or petrol, or even when it's running on electric, most of it is produced by fossil fuels. It is insane ecology. I believe in ecology. I believe in going for net zero. But what I do not endorse is insane ecology. And it's a little bit unkind to say it without having able to defend ourselves. But the policies of the Greens, in my opinion, are insanity. To leave us unprotected, unemployed because of the minimum wage, which many companies won't be able to afford to pay. And you end up on unemployment, which is far less than they're earning by choice working, unprotected because they want to get rid of our nuclear weapons and leave us at the mercy of all the crazy tyrants that have them. Unable to travel because, as a taxi driver said for me, if I vote for the Greens, I'm going to be unemployed because they're going to take my job away from me. And under house arrest. I don't know if you heard the suggestion that men should be locked up after 6 o'clock. You know, but there are many crazy ecological ideas going around. And I do believe we have to clean up the pollution in London, but I think that we also, you can't force that immediately. Electric cars are not developed. There are not the charging points. You can't force it on people now. You have to work towards it. And so what I think, what's especially annoys me is that that Khan, as I said, is not the elected mayor of London at this time. He's standing in during the year during COVID, and yet during this last year, he's forced so many things on Londoners without consulting them, without them being able to object or have any say in what happens to their communities. And as I said, it's becoming dangerous. So I strayed a little bit from the police, but I think getting rid of some of these low traffic zones and all kinds of things are very important to policing in London. But there's much more that we need to do, especially to protect children, especially to protect women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a few clarifications quick. It was Sarah Everard, by the way, you were talking about earlier, I assume, and I also do remember about the diesel cars. And funnily enough, I did try and get the Greens on, but they turned me down. They could still come if they wanted to. But the next thing I wanted to ask you actually was that
I'm sorry. You're like me. You look younger than you are. I hope you take it as a compliment.
I do, yeah.
People don't think I'm as old as I am.
The next thing I wanted to ask you actually was like, how would you make London prosperous again, as you've outlined on your campaign page?
Yeah, well, I think we need to really support small businesses. We need to cut red tape. We need to encourage tourism. I love one of the things I would enjoy most as mayor is inviting the world to come visit us, because London is the most unbelievable city of the world. this may appear an exaggeration, and it might be because I can't remember the exact figures, but we probably have a museum, a different museum you could visit every day of the year. I'll have to check up on my facts there, but there are so many that I've been to and so many that I want to and so many that are fascinating. We have the West End with the most amazing shows when they end lockdown. It is the most amazing place. We have the most amazing architecture. I love the fact that we have some of the most beautiful classical buildings, but I also love the modern buildings that we have in London. It is the most amazing city of the world, and the world needs to come here. And we need a mayor who's not charging people to enter London, but who's saying, come on, come and spend your money here. We need a mayor who's not discouraging people coming, but encouraging them to come here. So there are many things we need to do. As I said, we need to encourage shops, because the high street shop may become a thing of the past the way many things are going. And of course, by discouraging cars in London, we're discouraging many people from coming in London. I sometimes think Khan's trying to make it so, well, I say he's trying to take us back to the 19th century where where everybody except the rich has to walk or ride a bicycle. And they're trying to force biking on people. But the reality is biking isn't for most people. Most people can't cycle to work and then expect to do a day's work. Cycling is energetic. Now, you might say, well, we should encourage people to be energetic. Some people are working so hard, the need is to have to work. And this is especially something I'm passionate about because I was raised on a council estate. My family were not rich. We were one of the last families to have a car. And I remember the excitement as a kid when my mum got her first car. I can visualize it today. I was so proud that we had a car. And so most of the parties that are running against me for mayor of election are trying to take people's cars away from them, in my opinion. They're trying to make London a car-free zone. And the reality is, a car to me is the most important thing, perhaps after food and a warm bed, in people's lives. The ability to have freedom to travel. And Khan, perhaps it appears he wants everyone to ride on buses. Well, I guess his dad was a bus driver, but I say I appear, I'm not accusing him, but it seems to me that's what he's trying to do. But when I was growing up, only really poor people used buses. It was the last resort, the last chance, the last choice, sitting huddled up with other people in a bus. And it's especially foolish during this whole lockdown period to be forcing people not to be able to travel in their own vehicles. And we're saying isolate, and then we're forcing people to be together. To me, it's ridiculous. I was just before the latest lockdown, I had to fly on business, and all the way up to check-in desk, there was the 2-meter separation, and throughout it, and even getting on the plane. Then on the plane, they sat people three seats in a row, side by side to each other, for the flight. And so there are so many things where there appears to be real stupidity. People paid a lot of money to turn their bars and restaurants into COVID safe environments, and then it was all closed down, and many of these businesses will never reopen. They say a quarter of the businesses in London have gone bankrupt, and so that's one of the things. We must end lockdown now. The majority of the most vulnerable have now been vaccinated, and of course vaccination doesn't stop the spread or protect you from getting it anyway, so they tell us. And so we've got to get London back moving again. We've got to kickstart London, and I'll look at various incentives for businesses to help them get restarted again. Of course, there's a limit to the mayor's ability to do that, but I will be lobbying government too, because we must save London. And the way I see it going, which is why I stood for mayor, it's the first time I've stood for a political office before, and is because we have to rescue London from loonies, in my opinion, on the left, who are trying to force their ideologies onto everybody else without consultation, without their wishes. And unfortunately, many people won't fight back. But the thing about UKIP, we were started as a protest movement. Many people don't realize that. Almost 30 years ago, we started to stand up to the elite at Westminster. Sorry, it's hot today. The sun is shining bright. And we to stand up to the political elite who were forcing their opinions on. We said the people must be given a vote. And ever since then, we've fought for democracy. We've fought for human rights. We've fought for people to have the right. We've fought for the right of freedom to speech, which has sometimes appeared to backfire on us because people within UKIP have said things which some people have been horrified with, and certainly things that I do not agree with. But what I do agree with is freedom of speech, and freedom of speech means you have to allow people you disagree with to say things you dislike. But then you have the freedom of speech to answer back and to prove why they are wrong. But there's this cancel culture, this silence culture where anybody says anything which the ultra left disagree with, they're canceled. They have their bullies that force them to be silenced, that force the broadcasting companies or the newspapers to fire them. And we use this. We are taking steps towards what is happening in Myanmar, to what's happening in China, where the government clamped down on anybody who doesn't say what they want them to say. And freedom of speech is our greatest, one of our greatest rights and privileges in Britain, which has to be protected. People will say things that are nasty, that we disagree with. And there are courses of action to take if they do. If they have hate speech or they try to cause bloodshed or whatever, then they need to be arrested. But there are courses for action. But the cancel culture, where if anybody says something which people do not agree with, they are instantly silenced, will backfire on us. Because the people who are fighting for it today are the people who in the future, these laws that they're trying to force will be used against to shut them down. And it's always, you look at Nazism, you look at all of the different regimes that there have been in history, they always start with cancel culture. Germany and Nazism started with book burning of anything that disagreed with their philosophies, and books being burnt in the street. And so freedom of speech has to be protected, even if it gives freedom of speech to people who we totally disagree with and who we hate what they say.
Mm-hmm. The next question I wanted to ask you was that you note that TfL, Transport for London, is bankrupt on your campaign page. You talk about that. How would you reverse this and make TfL solvent and in the black or green again? I can't remember the saying.
Yeah. All right. Well, the first thing is 1.4 billion journeys a year on TfL. Now think about that. If the average is four or 5 pounds on a journey, 1.4 billion, even if it was just £1, that would be 1.4 billion pounds to run this system that Khan has run to the ground, built up so much debt with. It should be paying for itself. I think it's 1.3 million underground tube journeys a day, twice as many bus journeys as that a day. It should be paying for itself. Part of the problem is, and it's running efficiently in lockdown, but that's especially put, if you look at my Twitter, which is Gammons 4, the number 4 London, I put videos there where I've been traveling on underground trains with only one other person in the train, in the 2 or 3 carriages that are interconnected. And I videoed it and shown it. I've arrived on platforms where there's only one person or not even one other person on the platform. I joke that Khan's giving me, I called it the ghost train. Khan's giving me my own train and my own underground station. Now, yes, you have to keep services running during this, but anybody I would think with sense would say, if I cut 4 out of 5 train journeys, nobody's going to have to wait more than 10 minutes. And nobody's going to be forced into conditions that do not fit with COVID restrictions. You're still going to have a whole row of seats to yourself facing someone or close to somebody the other side who has almost a row of seats to themselves. But you cut 4/5 of the running costs. But it doesn't seem to be happening. Things seem to be running as they were with almost empty trains. So there's inefficiency is one of the things we need. And 2 of the things that I think are very important to me as mayor are, number 1, consult the people, and number 2, have people always checking statistics and checking what is happening. Have people who are checking every train, how many people are getting on, how many people are getting off. It can be done through CCTVs. Find out what services are efficient, where to run them, increase trains, when to cut them back, anticipate when you have to increase extra. Again, the other day, I was heading to a TV interview and in a taxi, and I went past a row of buses, and there was, I believe it was five or six buses with like one person on each bus, all stopped there at the same stop-off point. It's madness, especially with especially when you consider that so many that people are locked down at the moment. So inefficiency. There are many overpaid staff, in my opinion, at Transport for London. There's over 500 on 100,000 a year. There are several people, it's public knowledge, that are on $500,000 plus salaries a year. That is ridiculous. In my opinion, no one working in the public sector, working in government or organizations, should be earning more than the Prime Minister. It's ridiculous. And so, again, Khan with his, I'm not suggesting he drinks it, but I call them the champagne socialists who do not represent the working class anymore. These people have lost touch with reality. They're running an inefficient service, and they're being rewarded and given pay rises and increases for a service that is failed. And Khan never seems to be able to accept responsibility for his own decision. He always blames the government for everything. They point out, well, in other countries, the government pays for more. But I believe Transport for London needs to be run by people who know how to make it pay for itself. I know we have COVID at the minute, but that's no excuse. It was facing bankruptcy before COVID. In my opinion, it's being run inefficiently. And so every department is under review when I'm mayor. Now, here's another thing that is very important. I am very much a centrist politically. For some reason, people have associated UKIP with the far right, but I believe this is very unfair and very untrue. The reason they've done it is there was an attempt by some right-wing extremists, in my opinion. There was an attempt to take over the party and turn it into just that. But what many people don't realize was they failed. They were some were expelled, some resigned, some were suspended, but this attempt to turn into an ultra-right political group failed. And I'm very much a centrist. To give you an example of where I stand politically, my mother voted for Labour, my father voted Liberal, and most of the other members of my family voted Conservative. So I was raised in a family with vastly political differing views. And I came to realize that they all, as I heard these arguments, they all had some very good points. And so my plan as mayor will be to put together a non-partisan team of people from the left, from the right. I don't care if they vote Labour, if they vote Conservative, as long as they're not bigots and as long as they're not racist, as long as they're not haters. I don't care about their politics. I want the best people for the best job. I don't care about their political leaning. I don't want ideologists who are going to force on Londoners their ideology against the wishes of the London people. We are there to serve London. We are there to serve Londoners. But politically, I'm the best person for the job because I'm very much a centrist in my politics. I don't lean left or right. There are things I like about some of the left, especially much of their social concern. There are things that I like about the right in protecting people's freedom of speech, in not going overboard, in how would I word it? Forcing ideologies on everybody else. I'm very balanced, I believe, politically, and very centrist in my politics, and I think that's very important for London. And and so people have these concepts. When you mention UKIP, many people instantly think of something. For example, some people have accused you, oh, you're racist, which is far from the truth. Over half of the candidates, UKIP candidates for the Greater London Assembly, over half of them are from ethnic minority groups. We have people from India, we have people, Muslim candidates, we have Jewish candidates, we have Black, white, Asian, we have in the most diverse group of candidates represented. We have people from, I've just made a note here, from Europe, from Central Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Central Europe, from India, from the Middle East, from the West Indies, from Africa, people from many different backgrounds. And that is so important because London is, the beauty of London is a beautiful collection of different people from different backgrounds, all who are one in London. And that should be what we're building, a united London. which is one of my key policies. And so I believe that there's a fresh chance for UKIP and for myself to really unite Londoners. And as I said, there have been those in the past in UKIP who've said things that I vehemently disagree with and find repulsive. But the leadership of UKIP now and the people that are a part of the NEC are a wonderful, wonderful people. And I don't believe that they hold racist views. And I believe that we're a party that represents all Londoners. It's exciting. The 11 candidates for the Assembly come from 10 different boroughs in London. They're people that specialize. Again, I've written this down. Just I don't forget: business, charity, civil rights, education, health, hospitality, law, local government, and media are different areas where we have specialists that are running for the Assembly. So don't just vote for me for mayor. It's important to vote UKIP for the Assembly, because if Khan does get back in again, the most important thing is to have people in the GLA who dare to stand up to him and who won't let him just get away with what he wants. Unfortunately, people vote Labour, and if he has too many people on the Assembly from Labour, they can blueprint everything he wants to do in turning London into what he wants it to be and what most Londoners don't want it to be, I thought, or I would have hoped or expected. And so it's important not just to vote for me for mayor, but to vote for UKIP for the Assembly.
We're going to be talking about a bit more about UKIP party politics and uniting London as a city later on. But the next question I wanted to ask you is that on your campaign page as well, you talk about making London affordable. How could you make the city affordable again to people like me who are in their early 20s, for example?
Well, when I talk about affordable, number one, I talk about affordable housing. And I think we have to look at these various areas, brown sites and things that you mentioned, and perhaps some of the green sites too. We have to look at them. Some people hate my ideas, but I've never had people who hate my ideas who've got better ones. I want to see small plot properties built. That people have talked very much about. You have to have a certain size homes for people. I think of myself as a young person. I don't think of myself now as a young person. I think when I was a young person, what I wanted to do was to get on the property ladder. And you or others may disagree with me, which is one of the great things about life. You are allowed to disagree. But I would rather have a small one-bedroom or even studio place that belonged to me than be renting a bigger place that I was wasting money every month throwing it into somebody else's pocket. So my target is to build 100,000 small one-bedroom properties for £150,000 each, not part ownership. This is where I vastly diverge from Sean Bailey's part ownership, because I have friends that are in part ownership and it's fraught with problems. It's all so loaded towards developers and so loaded towards everybody else. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm told that many of the people, they're paying not only the interest on their part that they own, but they're paying the interest on what the other development company owns. And so it's wrong. So my goal is to help young people and to encourage government sponsorship and to work with, if I have to, new developers, because one of the problems is there's been too much luxury homes built compared to affordable homes. And very much, I believe, we have to build affordable homes. But many of the developers that have been developing London, they're not interested in providing housing for ordinary people, for poorer families, for young people to get on the property ladder. They just want to build luxury homes that they can sell for $1 million or more per apartment. And so I'm going to part ways with those people. I want to see a whole new group of developers come along who are willing to make a fair profit and a fair income, but their priority will be to help get young people, especially, into the property market. And so we'll be looking in, if I get mayor, I'll be looking to build small properties. I personally like high-rise properties. Some people are against high-rise properties, but to me, it's a great use of space. And as long as there's parks, and whether the park on top or at the side, there are many, many options. I've lived in a number of different flats and apartments over the years and seen some incredible things, from rooftop parks to or to halfway up, to open atriums, all kinds of possibilities and ideas. But I personally favor going up in building and going down in price to help people get there. First-time buyers having benefits with mortgages. Let's get as many, especially young couples, young people in London, let's get them on the property market and get them started. And then when they sell that and prices rise with the cost of living, they'll be able to then move to the 2 to 3 bedroom houses that are there. Yes, we have to build for families and that as well. But my big concern, because I'm a father and I'm a grandfather, and I know I don't look old enough, but you know, my daughter and son-in-law, they can't even get started. They can't even get started on the property ladder. They're tied into having to rent, and they both work. And so I think it's very hard. And so I'm very passionate. And I know many of these other parties who seem more liberal in their views, they would disagree with me. The home has to be a certain size or otherwise it's humane and things. To me, what is inhumane is forcing young people to throw money away renting when they could actually be buying their own homes and getting started. And so I'm passionate about fighting for people. This is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it because I want to be a politician. There's a price and a cost to me if I have to give up and become a politician. But I'm fighting for Londoners. I'm fighting for people. I'm fighting for cladding victims who I believe are being abused by developers who cut corners, who should be paying for the repairs, not the cladding victims, against government who are failing to be responsible, because it was primarily the Labour and Conservative councils that gave planning permission and passed for these unsafe buildings to be there, and they're not dealing with it. There are people who are living with the mental stress of their house now being worth less than the size of their mortgage, with bills of 60,000 or more to contribute to something which was not their fault and which they didn't know was an issue when they bought it. To the most serious issue of all is that they are living in homes which are unsafe, and a Grenfell Tower could happen again if we don't hurry up and get this done, and the government must pay for it. But really, then people can fight about who's going to pay for it. But I certainly see the owners, the tenant, as the victims, and I believe that the developers and the councils that were irresponsible should be paying for that. So I'm fighting for people. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I've been passionate about all my life, going back to nearly 40 years ago. A little girl came up and tugged on my coattail while I was in Africa and said, my mother threw me out on the street because my father died of AIDS, and my stepfather, she remarried a stepfather, threw all the children out, and we live on the street. Can you help? And I was with an African pastor at the time, a minister. And I said to him, can you help this child? And he said, we don't have any money to help. So I came back to England, and among my friends, nobody received any salary or anything for it. I raised the money. I bought a piece of land in Lake Victoria and built an orphans village, which at the time was to home up to 250 children whose parents had died of AIDS. So this is going back to the 1980s, when I was involved in compassionate projects, and I've been involved in many others since. We built it. We built the 3-story building. We built staff quarters and school. And then I handed it over to an organization in London, to one of the London charities. It was an amazing situation. They'd had a butcher die, I think, back in the 19th century, and he had left the money for schools that taught children how to butcher animals. Well, they had the problem that they couldn't release this money because no school in England can teach children how to butcher animals. And so they had this money tied up in trust. And so I gave them the orphans village to take it over, which they can teach them such things as building and how to butcher animals and things out there, as part of where it's not culturally unacceptable for families to do these kind of things themselves. And by doing so, then they could advertise what they were doing with this orphanage to raise new money in England to support them. And so I've always been involved in projects helping people. I personally support about 200 charities. When I've written many books and signed over 90% of the income from my books to go directly to charity, because I care about people. And that's why I'm running as mayor, because I care about people.
On that subject, for that, by the way, how would you unite the city as you pledge to do so on your campaign website?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to stop this two-tier policing, where one group, the police, back off, another group, they go in aggressively. We have to have one law for London. I think we need to emphasizing differences. I love Southall. Southall fascinates me. It has done since the 1980s, when I used to go there with my Sikh friends a lot. That Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh all live together in harmony. There's not I just saw people all friendly with one another. And to me, it became almost like prophetic, almost like what London has to be, what the world can be. That when you stop pointing out people's differences, then people can actually live together and realize that there's beauty in diversity. And just because someone wears a turban, it doesn't mean that everybody that wears a turban is the same. We need to see everybody as a unique individual, no matter what their orientation, whatever their color or whatever. Everybody's beautiful and everybody is unique. And when you emphasize the division between black and white, now, of course, we must expose and fight against racism. But when you keep emphasizing division, you actually further division. And we need to celebrate the diversity of London and love one another. I think one of the great things about COVID is so many people owe their lives to people who come from different cultural, ethnic backgrounds, that any kind of racism, any kind of divisiveness is stupidity. And so we have to focus on things that unite us rather than things that divide us. Cultural events that I plan, celebrating different cultures, musical events in the city, many things that I call events in the park. I have so many ideas for things that really can unite London. And I think, personally, I believe that Shaddi Khan has played on division to get votes. He's emphasized things that make people angry rather than make people realize the beauty of one another. He's caused division in communities, in my view.
Okay, the next question I wanted to ask was, you want to make the city eco-friendly. How do you pledge to go around and do this? And how would you do this? Yeah.
Well, the first thing is I'm proposing 10 new parks. Now, when I say I'm proposing, I'm supporting several groups in London, I'm checking in my mind whether I should tell you who they are, because during campaign, many organizations don't like you to mention their group in case it appears that they support you rather than you support them. So let me word it this. I actually support several groups that protect London's parks and green space outside of running for mayor. Before running for mayor, I was already donating to them each month and believing in their policies. And so there are several groups that have plans for new parks in London, and I'm supporting various plans for 10 new parks in London, plus 1 million new trees across the city. And I told you about my Plant a Tree in 23, my plan to get young people to come to London and plant trees, have some kind of graph where they can actually see which tree they planted. If ever there becomes a problem with that tree, they can plant a new one. But so that for everyone, every kid across Britain, eventually. But as I said, my plan is from the 10 million school children we have in England, almost 10 million, that at least 1 in 10 will come during my term in office and plant 1 million trees in various places across London. It's possible that, as I said, there's 8 million trees already. So we're not talking, we're talking about for every tree, just one more tree in or by it. And so it's very achievable. And trees are the solution. Think about it this way. The average petrol or diesel car puts out something like 4 tons of CO2. The average beech tree absorbs 40 tons of CO2. So they are nature's natural vacuum cleaners. But they also beautify cities. I believe one of the issues to crime is that concrete jungles are where a lot of crime takes place. They're terrible environment. And we have to change this. Again, I've just pledged my full support to a charity in London, which is looking to beautify housing estates, to put trees and gardens and plants in all of London's estates where they're being redeveloped and refurbished. And so that is my main ecological thing: to trees, protect the green spaces, provide further green spaces. Everybody needs them nearby. Excuse me. And lockdown has been one of those occasions, especially. Lockdown has been one of those occasions where it's emphasized for people's mental health how important it is to have green space nearby where they can go. And one of my concerns, and I guess it's owned by the housing areas, but so many of the central London parks, only the residents of the houses around that are allowed to go in them. So we need to make sure that most people, when they want to go for a walk in a park, and I'll give away where I'm living, they end up in Brompton Cemetery, and it actually has some beautiful things there. But but we ought to be able to offer something other than a cemetery for people who want to go for a peaceful walk, and so we do need a lot more green space in London, and we need to make sure, as I said, all future developments, when I'm there, all future developments will have to include parks and green space.
Mhm. And a more personal question now about party politics. You, if I'm not mistaken, you left the Brexit Party for UKIP a few years back, if I'm not mistaken. Why did you do this? And on top of that, if you don't mind me asking, who were you talking about earlier? We were talking about like certain people who wanted to make UKIP ultra right wing, and also the final thing to this: why should people vote for UKIP over Richard Tice's Reform Party in the Assembly elections as well, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay, let me try and take those in order. I left Brexit Party. Well, I don't really want to make an issue about it, but I didn't feel that they were going to really fight for people. Everything revolved around Nigel, and nobody else seemed to be shining or able to shine within the party. And I just felt that it wasn't the solution for Britain. And I think also with Richard Tice's party, I don't see them fighting for anything. They're not fighting for Londoners. It's the same with Lawrence Fox and all these others. They just have one issue, which is aspects of freedom of speech, aspects of protect our statues, things like that. But this is not what you need a mayor for. These, as mayor, many of these candidates that are running for mayor, I would gladly have them to head up departments, but they're not what London needs for a mayor. London needs a mayor who will fight for people, not just for certain ideological aspects, whether it's we should have freedom of speech, whether it's we should protect our statues or whatever. These are not the issue for London. London is about people. I've had people come up to me and say, you ought to emphasize this, you ought to emphasize that. I said, all I'm interested in is when Londoners wake up in the morning, what do they think about? When Londoners are stressed, what is stressing them? These are the things that are important to me in running for mayor. And I felt that Brexit Party, Reform, and all of these others, to me, they are one party policy people. And I know that they've added some others onto it, but the things they've added, they've taken from UKIP. I've never heard any of them that are promoting anything that is not UKIP's policies. And so some of them have distanced themselves from UKIP because of former leaders or members of the party who they felt were extreme. And I have to say there are people from the past that I found extreme. I'm not going to go into starting mentioning names or things because I don't think that's fair if those people are not there to defend themselves. But I think many people will think of people within the party that have said things that they don't agree with as I do. But I believe that UKIP is back on force. And why did we vote for UKIP? Because we are the people who dare to stand up. We're ordinary people. The UKIP membership was made up of ordinary working class people, ordinary people who said, no, we've had enough of the politicians forcing things on us. We're going to fight back. And so we've been a protest movement, really, and still are. Without UKIP, there would never have been a referendum. But for 28 years, we fought for a 24, 26, because it was 2016 that we had the referendum. But for many years, we were fighting for a referendum. We were fighting for the freedom of the people to make the decision instead of the politicians to make the decisions. And that's why I believe it's vital to vote for UKIP in the GLA as well. Vote for me for mayor. If I don't get mayor, it's important you tick that box that says UKIP, because that will help me get a seat on the London Assembly so that at least somebody has some kind of control over Khan or whoever gets into, many people are predicting he'll get back. I don't know, I hope not, but at least he needs to have some people who will stand up. And there aren't many of them that will. A vote for almost any of the other party is going to be a weak vote. You need a strong vote. You need a strong voice. You need someone like myself you can write to and say, please challenge Khan about this. And isn't going to be afraid of standing up to him or standing up to whoever the next mayor is.
Yeah, that's fine. These are all 3 quick fire questions anyway, so we're nearly.
Yeah,
this is fine.
that's correct.
Yeah, okay. The first out of the 3 is, if you don't win this position, what do you plan for your political future? Especially because you said this is the first time you've run for political office. Would you do that again, run for political office, or what would you consider for your political future?
Well, I'm also lead candidate for UKIP for the generalist for the Greater London Assembly, the GLA, and so if you vote, number one, if you definitely people are going to vote for the candidate, vote for me as your second choice, because the candidate gets 50%. The top 2 candidates, they had to get a first and second choice. And that's how I possibly could win this. Because if I can get into second place and the Conservative candidate doesn't seem to have a lot of support, including from the Conservatives, I could win it on the first and second choice, because people from Labour who vote Khan the first choice are not going to vote for Bailey with their second choice. And people who vote Conservative and vote for Bailey as their first choice are not going to vote for Khan as their second choice. And so when it comes to adding up first and second choice, if you put me as your second choice, I can actually win this, because I believe that I can garner votes from all across the political spectrum, because that's what I represent. Being a centrist politically, I can represent every Londoner in a way that no other candidate will want to or could do. And the second thing is you need to vote for UKIP for the GLA, because if I don't get the mayor's job, then if I get on the GLA, on the London Assembly, then at least we have someone to put some measure of control over who the next mayor is, to stop them just forcing on Londoners their agenda, which is the thing that bothers me most, that Khan is forcing. And even when he's not currently the elected mayor of London, he's the interim mayor until the elections, he's forcing things on people against their wishes. And that's why you need somebody like me, somebody like the team we have at UKIP, who will dare to stand up. For 28 years, we've stood up to political bullies. Whether people like or hate UKIP, whether people voted in or out, we were not fighting primarily about Brexit. We were fighting about democracy. The people should decide. And that's why you need to vote for a party who will fight for the people. And that's what I'll do. I'll be honest with you. When it came to Brexit, I wanted out of Europe because I didn't like the dominance of other European countries over Britain, that they were overriding Britain, being able to make our own laws, make our own rules. And basically, well, how can I say this without using rude words? They were plundering our seas and taking 80% of our fish. They were stopping us fishing our own waters. They were all kinds of things. They were coming up with the concept of a European army and things which I was born close enough to the end of the Second World War. My parents, my grandparents all fought in the Second World War and risked their lives for Britain to be free and independent of Germany. And people, of course, they use the term Nazi rather than Germany, but and yet I see that same dominating spirit in several European nations, and that's why I wanted out. That's why I joined UKIP. That's why I joined. That's why I wanted to leave. But even people who voted Remain need to vote for me, because now that one's a dead issue about whether we're coming in or staying out. Now you need somebody who will have that same fight for London and for Londoners and for people who are being taken advantage of. And that's why I'm fighting for London and for Londoners. So if I don't get mayor, I trust I'll get a seat on the general on the London Assembly. And if I don't get that, I'm going to have a really nice holiday.
Okay, here's the penultimate question, and this is the title of the show, and it's what I ask all my guests. What would your ideal world be?
Well, I've never been asked that question before, but I think people living in harmony, people free to live their lives as they choose, people loving one another, people respecting one another, people accepting one another, people not forcing their ideologies on other people. It's a beautiful world, and I think that's important. That's why I believe very much in freedom of speech, freedom of religion, why I support people who are very different to me and have very different choice of identity or whatever. But I believe everybody needs to be free to live their life as they choose, and respect other people's right to that too.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for coming on. If people wanted to find you and find out more about your campaign, where should they head to? Like, what social media or website should they go to?
Yeah, well, on Twitter, I Twitter every day, or tweet every day, whatever it is, the issues that are on my mind. At Gammons for London, the number 4. But my main site to go to start out is called www.gammons, Gammons. Make sure you include the S. I'm Gammons, but I'm not Gammon. And so it's gammons.london. www.gammons.london, and you'll find my 6 key policies there. You'll find my message to London there. And as I said, I value your vote. I believe I can unite London. I believe that I can make London a better and safer place for all. And I believe I can unite London and unite the political divisions that are in London, unite all of the things that are in London. And very important, vote UKIP for the London Assembly, so that way it's a win-win. If I get mayor, that's wonderful. If I don't, I still get on the Assembly, so we can have some measure of control over the next mayor's decisions.
Thank you very much for coming on today. And yeah, that'll be all. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks ever so much. Lovely joining you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the Ed Interviews YouTube channel, and also the Ed Interviews BitChute channel, and also look at my stuff on Mixcloud as well. I'll have more of this content coming in, and also subscribe to my Patreon subscribe site as well for more guest requests, as well as free copies of my old books. Until then, see you next time, guys.